So far, we have learned how Quintilian trained an orator, how speeches are structured, and how legal arguments are organized. Now we come to a more technical part of rhetoric. Do not worry if the terms on this slide seem difficult at first. By the end of this explanation, they will become very simple. This slide teaches us two important distinctions. The first distinction is about evidence, or how an orator proves a case. The second distinction is about style, or how an orator makes language beautiful. These four concepts are frequently asked in competitive examinations. So let us understand them one by one. Part 1. Inartificial proofs. Look at the first box. It says, inartificial proofs, or in Latin, probationem inartificiales. The word inartificial sounds difficult, but the meaning is very simple. It means proofs that already exist before the speaker begins speaking. The orator does not create these proofs. They already exist in the outside world. Look at the examples given on the slide. Laws, contracts, witness testimony, torture. In ancient Roman legal practice, let us understand this with an example. Imagine you are a lawyer defending a client. Your client has a written contract signed by both parties. Did you create that contract? No, it already existed. Or suppose there is CCTV footage. Did the lawyer create the video? No, it already existed. Or suppose a witness comes to court. The witness existed before the lawyer entered the courtroom. These are all examples of inartificial proofs. The lawyer simply uses them. The lawyer does not invent them. Think of cooking. Imagine your mother gives you vegetables that are already available in the kitchen. You did not grow the vegetables. You simply use them while cooking. Similarly, the orator uses evidence that already exists. That is why these are called inartificial proofs. Part 2. Artificial proofs. Now let us move to the second box. It says, artificial proofs, or probationem artificiales. Notice the difference. These proofs are created by the speaker's own intelligence and skill. They do not exist automatically. The orator constructs them. The slide gives two examples. Enthememes and signs. Let us first understand the general idea. Imagine two lawyers. Both have exactly the same evidence, the same witnesses, the same documents. Yet one lawyer presents a much stronger argument than the other. Why? Because one lawyer thinks more logically. The lawyer connects the evidence more effectively. This logical reasoning is an artificial proof. Now let us understand the term enthememe. An enthememe is a shortened logical argument. For example, all murderers should be punished. This man committed murder. Therefore, he should be punished. Sometimes one part of the argument is left unstated because the audience already understands it. That is called an enthememe. Another example. Imagine someone says, he must be a good doctor because hundreds of patients trust him. The speaker is creating a logical argument. This is not an existing document. It is created by reasoning. That is an artificial proof. So remember the difference. Inartificial proofs are found. Artificial proofs are created. That is the easiest way to remember them. Comparing the two types of proof. Let us compare both together. Suppose you are trying to prove that a student attended school. You show the attendance register. That is an inartificial proof because the register already exists. Now suppose you argue, the student attended regularly because his examination performance shows consistent learning. That reasoning is created by your own thinking. It becomes an artificial proof. One comes from external evidence. The other comes from logical argument. A skilled orator uses both. Part 3. Trope. Now we move from evidence to style. The first stylistic term is trope, or tropus. The slide defines it as semantic alteration. That simply means changing the meaning of words. The word itself remains the same, but its meaning changes. The slide gives 3 examples. Metaphor, irony, hyperbole. Let us understand each one. First, metaphor. If I say, time is money, is time actually money? No. The meaning has changed. The sentence tells us that time is valuable. This is a metaphor. Now consider irony. Imagine someone walks into the classroom completely soaked because of heavy rain. Another student says, "What wonderful weather." The speaker actually means the opposite. That is irony. Now consider hyperbole. Suppose a student says, "I have told you 1,000,000 times." Has the student literally spoken 1,000,000 times? No. The number is exaggerated for emphasis. That is hyperbole. Notice something common in all these examples. The meanings of words change. That is why they are called tropes. Part 4. Figure. Now let us look at the final box. It says, figure, or figura. The slide explains it as structural arrangement. This means the meaning stays the same. Only the arrangement of words changes. This is the biggest difference between a trope and a figure. The slide gives 3 examples. Antithesis, anaphora, hyperbaton. Let us understand these. First, antithesis. This places opposite ideas together. For example, speech is silver, but silence is gold. The contrast makes the sentence memorable. Second, anaphora. This means repeating the same word at the beginning of successive sentences. For example, we will study, we will work, we will succeed. The repeated phrase gives rhythm and emphasis. Third, hyperbaton. This means changing the normal order of words. For example, instead of saying, "I cannot forget you," a poet may write, "You, I cannot forget." The meaning remains the same. Only the arrangement changes. That is a figure, the most important examination point. Now look carefully at the examination trigger in the center. This is probably the most important point on the entire slide. It says, tropes change meaning, figures change arrangement. This single sentence can help you answer many examination questions. Remember it carefully. Suppose the examiner asks, what is the difference between a trope and a figure? Your answer should be, a trope changes the meaning of words. A figure changes the arrangement of words without changing the meaning. This is the simplest and most accurate distinction. A simple everyday example. Imagine you tell your friend, "You are a shining star." Your friend is not literally a star. The meaning changes. This is a trope. Now imagine you say, "Today we learn. Today we improve. Today we succeed." Here, the repeated structure creates beauty. The meaning has not changed. Only the arrangement creates emphasis. This is a figure, bringing everything together. Notice that this slide discusses both proof and style. An orator must first convince the audience with strong evidence. That is why Quintilian explains artificial and inartificial proofs. Then the orator must express ideas beautifully. That is why he explains tropes and figures. Good rhetoric requires both. Strong arguments alone may sound dull. Beautiful language without evidence may sound empty. Quintilian wanted both logic and elegance. Easy memory trick. For examinations, remember these 4 ideas using 2 simple pairs. Evidence. Inartificial already exists. Artificial created by the speaker. Style. Trope changes meaning. Figure changes arrangement. Or remember this simple formula. Found evidence is inartificial. Created logic is artificial. Meaning changes is trope. Arrangement changes is figure. Conclusion. The central message of this slide is that Quintilian believed effective rhetoric depends on both convincing evidence and elegant expression. An orator should know when to rely on external evidence and when to build logical arguments, and should also understand how to beautify language through tropes, which change meaning, and figures, which change arrangement. By combining logical proof with artistic style, the orator becomes not only persuasive but also memorable, fulfilling Quintilian's ideal of eloquence that is both intellectually powerful and aesthetically refined. So far, we have studied Quintilian's educational system, his methods of argument, and his techniques of rhetoric. Now we come to a very interesting topic. This slide is not about how to speak. Instead, it asks a different question. What kind of style should an orator use? Should a speaker use simple and balanced language? Or should the speaker use dramatic, emotional, and highly decorative language? This question created one of the biggest literary debates in ancient Rome. This slide calls it the Battle of Styles. On one side stood the supporters of Atticism. On the other side stood the supporters of Asianism. Quintilian carefully examined both styles and clearly chose one over the other. Let us understand why. The aesthetic war. Look at the left side of the slide. It is called the aesthetic war. The word aesthetic simply means beauty or artistic style. Different writers believed that beautiful language should look different. Quintilian compared these styles and asked, which style creates the best orator? First style, pro-atticism. The first style is pro-atticism. The slide describes it as restrained, clear, elegant, and balanced. This was Quintilian's favorite style. The word restrained means controlled. The speaker does not exaggerate. The language is disciplined. The word clear means easy to understand. The audience should never become confused. The word elegant means beautiful without becoming excessive. The word balanced means every sentence is carefully planned. Nothing is unnecessary. The slide also tells us that this style was modeled after Cicero. Why did Quintilian admire Cicero so much? Because Cicero combined beauty with clarity. His speeches were powerful without becoming dramatic. Imagine two teachers explaining the same lesson. The first teacher explains calmly, clearly, and logically. Every student understands. The second teacher keeps shouting, acting dramatically, and using difficult words. Students may be impressed for a few minutes, but they may not actually understand the lesson. Quintilian preferred the first teacher. For him, the purpose of eloquence was not to show off. The purpose was to communicate truth effectively. That is why he supported Atticism. Second style, anti-Asianism. Now let us move to the second style. The slide calls it anti-Asianism. This means Quintilian opposed Asianism. What was Asianism? The slide describes it as ornate, bombastic, highly theatrical, and emotionally excessive. Let us understand these words. Ornate means overloaded with decoration. Imagine wearing 20 pieces of jewelry at the same time. Instead of looking elegant, it becomes excessive. Similarly, language can become too decorative. Next, bombastic. This means using grand words simply to impress people. Sometimes speakers use complicated vocabulary not because it is necessary but because they want to sound intelligent. Quintilian disliked this. Then, highly theatrical. Imagine a speaker behaving more like an actor than a teacher. Too many dramatic gestures. Too much shouting. Too much performance. Finally, emotionally excessive. Emotion is important. We learned earlier that an orator should use pathos. But Quintilian believed emotion should always remain under control. Too much emotion weakens rational thinking. Therefore, he rejected the Asian style. Why did Quintilian prefer Atticism? This is an important examination question. Quintilian believed that rhetoric exists to serve truth. If style becomes more important than truth, rhetoric becomes dangerous. Imagine a beautifully wrapped gift box. The wrapping paper is attractive. But inside the box there is nothing valuable. Would the beautiful wrapping alone satisfy you? Of course not. Similarly, beautiful language without meaningful ideas becomes empty decoration. Quintilian wanted language to support ideas, not replace them. For him, style should serve meaning. Meaning should never become the servant of style. The Seneca warning. Now let us move to the right side of the slide. Here we see another important topic. The Seneca warning. The slide tells us that Quintilian specifically criticized Seneca the Younger. Now this may surprise many students. Seneca was one of Rome's greatest philosophers and writers. Did Quintilian hate Seneca? No. Quintilian respected Seneca's intelligence. But he believed that Seneca's writing style could become harmful if young students copied it without understanding its weaknesses. So Quintilian's criticism was mainly about style, not about Seneca's intelligence or philosophy. The charge, corrupta oratio. The slide gives an important Latin phrase. Corrupta oratio. This is an important examination keyword. It means, corrupt style of speaking. Why did Quintilian use such strong words? He believed Seneca's style encouraged students to admire clever expressions instead of developing clear reasoning. In other words, students began trying to sound brilliant instead of trying to think clearly. That, according to Quintilian, was dangerous. Why did Quintilian criticize Seneca? The slide explains the reason. It says Seneca's prose was disjointed, flashy, epigrammatic. Let us understand these one by one. First, disjointed. This means the ideas do not flow smoothly. Each sentence stands almost independently. The speech loses its continuous movement. Second, flashy. Imagine fireworks. They are bright and exciting, but they disappear quickly. Similarly, flashy language attracts attention but may not leave lasting understanding. Third, epigrammatic. An epigram is a short, clever, memorable statement. For example, difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. Such sentences are attractive. Seneca wrote many brilliant short statements called sententiae. Quintilian admired their cleverness. However, he believed that if every sentence tries to become a quotation, the overall speech loses unity. The audience remembers individual sentences instead of the complete argument. A simple example: imagine two students giving a seminar. The first student explains ideas clearly from beginning to end. Every point connects logically. The audience easily follows the discussion. The second student keeps using dramatic quotations and clever one-line statements. Everyone applauds individual sentences, but afterwards, nobody remembers the main argument. Which presentation truly teaches the audience? Quintilian would choose the first one. He believed clarity and organization are more valuable than constant cleverness. Was Quintilian completely against Seneca? No. This is an important clarification. Quintilian never said Seneca had no talent. In fact, he admitted that Seneca possessed remarkable intelligence. His concern was educational. Young students often imitate style without understanding judgment. They copy impressive expressions but neglect discipline, organization, and logical reasoning. Therefore, Quintilian warned teachers not to present Seneca as the first model for beginners. Students should first master Cicero's balanced style before experimenting with Seneca's originality. Examination focus. Now look at the examination trigger. It says, Corrupter Oratio is strictly associated with Quintilian's critique of Seneca. This is an important objective question. If the examiner asks, which term is associated with Quintilian's criticism of Seneca? The answer is, Corrupter Oratio. Remember this Latin phrase carefully. Easy memory trick. To remember the two styles, think of two different buildings. Atticism is like a well-designed library. Simple, strong, organized, beautiful because of its balance. Asianism is like a building covered with too many decorations. It attracts attention immediately, but the decoration may hide the actual structure. Now remember Quintilian's view. Atticism is clear, balanced, Cicero, approved. Asianism is ornate, excessive, Seneca's influence, criticized. And finally remember, Corrupter Oratio is Quintilian's criticism of Seneca's rhetorical style. Conclusion. The central message of this slide is that Quintilian believed true eloquence depends on disciplined expression rather than excessive ornamentation. He strongly supported the Attic style, inspired by Cicero, because it valued clarity, balance, elegance, and logical organization. Although he admired Seneca's intelligence, he warned that Seneca's fragmented, flashy, and epigrammatic style could mislead young students into valuing clever phrases over coherent reasoning. For Quintilian, the highest form of rhetoric was never language that merely impressed the audience. It was language that communicated truth with clarity, dignity, and moral responsibility. So far, we have learned how Quintilian educated an orator, how he structured speeches, and what kind of style he believed an orator should follow. Now we come to another very important question. How does someone become a great writer or speaker? Can greatness appear overnight? Can someone become another Cicero simply by reading one book? Quintilian says, Greatness develops through careful study, continuous practice, and intelligent learning from great masters. This idea is called imitatio, or imitation. However, Quintilian gives an important warning. Imitation is not copying. It is not plagiarism. Instead, it is a method of learning. This entire slide explains how students should learn from great writers while also developing their own originality. Let us understand it step by step. Part 1. What is imitatio? Look at the main box at the top. It defines imitatio. It says imitation is not plagiarism. This is the first idea every student must remember. Today, when we hear the word imitation, we often think about copying someone else's work. But Quintilian meant something very different. He believed students should carefully study the greatest writers of the past. The slide mentions two famous examples. Homer and Virgil. Students should observe how they build sentences, how they organize ideas, how they choose words, how they create beauty in language. The purpose is not to copy their exact sentences. The purpose is to understand the principles behind their excellence. Think about learning music. A beginner pianist first learns famous compositions by Mozart or Beethoven. The student practices them repeatedly. Does that mean the student is stealing Mozart's music? No. The student is learning technique. Later, the same student begins composing original music. Quintilian believed writing develops in exactly the same way. Students first imitate, then they innovate. Why did Quintilian encourage imitation? Imagine a child learning to write the alphabet. The child first copies the teacher's handwriting, letter after letter, day after day. Eventually, the child develops a personal handwriting style. Without first copying the alphabet correctly, that personal style would never develop. Similarly, Quintilian believed that beginners should first imitate excellent models. Only after mastering the basics should they create something original. Therefore, imitation is not the final goal. It is the starting point of learning. The purpose of studying great authors. The slide says students should absorb syntax, theme, elegance. Let us understand these. First, syntax. This means sentence structure. Students learn how great writers arrange words. Second, theme. Students observe how authors develop ideas and organize arguments. Third, elegance. Students learn how language becomes beautiful without becoming excessive. Notice something important. Students are learning methods, not memorizing sentences. That is why Quintilian called imitation an active process. The student must think, analyze, compare, and improve. The first pillar, didactic function. Now let us move to the first pillar. It is called didactic function. The slide explains, literature must serve a moral, educational purpose. The word didactic simply means teaching. Quintilian believed literature should not exist merely to entertain people. It should also educate. Imagine reading a story about honesty. After reading it, you become inspired to tell the truth. The story has taught you an important lesson. That is its didactic function. Think about many of Aesop's fables. Each story ends with a moral lesson. Similarly, Quintilian believed literature should improve both the mind and the character of the reader. A book should not simply make us happy. It should make us better human beings. The second pillar, emotional persuasion. Now look at the second pillar. It says, emotional persuasion. The slide explains that this combines ethos, pathos, and logos. We have already learned these ideas separately. Now Quintilian brings them together. Let us revise them. Ethos means credibility. The audience should trust the speaker. Logos means logical reasoning. The argument should make sense. Pathos means emotional appeal. The audience should feel emotionally connected. Imagine a doctor encouraging people to stop smoking. The doctor first presents scientific evidence. That is logos. The doctor speaks as an experienced medical professional. That is ethos. Finally, the doctor tells the story of a patient whose life was affected by smoking. That is pathos. Now the speech becomes far more persuasive. Quintilian believed truly effective rhetoric always balances these three elements.